The boring history for sleep. What ancient Hebrideans did when they ran out of salt. Hello friends, welcome back tonight. We are going to talk about what ancient Hebrideans did when they ran out of salt. If you are ready to know, then like the video and subscribe to the channel, but then when you are really enjoying our video, and tell me in the comment which country you're watching our video in and how much time you have, we love to know, turn off the lights and enjoy the video. You hear the sea long before you see it. A slow, ancient rhythm, like the breathing of something old and weary. The waves break softly against the jagged coast of the Hebrides, those lonely islands flung like lost stones off the northwestern edge of Scotland. It's early morning and you're standing on a narrow footpath lined with wind-gnarled heather. The sky is grey naturally, not the dramatic stormy kind, but a soft, overcast dome that seems to press gently on everything it touches, the kind of grey that encourages long naps and slow thoughts, which frankly is perfect. Because today, you're not in a rush. You probably won't make it through this day, and that's exactly the point. Here on this island, let's say southwest, though it hardly matters, you've woken in a tiny turf-roofed dwelling, with walls so thick they forget the wind exists. Outside there's the smell of peat smoke, wet wool and brine. A fishing net flaps lazily on a wooden post. A half-mended basket sits abandoned by the door. Someone will get to it. Eventually. Go ahead and take a moment to settle your shoulders, let your eyes droop a little, and while you're here, gently tap the like button. Only if your hands aren't too cozy. Leave a comment with your local time and where you're tuning in from. It helps us feel just a little more connected across the fog. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You live in a village that doesn't appear on most maps. Your neighbours are sheep. The local economy runs mostly on barter, gossip, and the weather's good moods. You fish when the sea allows, you harvest seaweed, you complain about your cousin's oatcakes, and when times get really tough, you run out of salt, which is where things get interesting, or at least interesting in the slow, oddly poetic way of ancient island life. Salt to you isn't just a flavour, it's life insurance. It preserves your fish, your mutton, your herring, it keeps food from turning into very persuasive arguments against living. And in a place where winters last for 6 months and boats don't always come back, salt is more valuable than gossip at a funeral. But today your salt barrel is almost empty. A pitiful crust at the bottom, like the last dregs of a forgotten tea. Your grandmother mutters something in Gaelic that may or may not be a curse. Your uncle sharpens his knife, not in anger, just out of habit. He sharpens everything. It's his thing. You gather with others in the village square, if you can call a muddy patch of earth surrounded by chickens a square. The mood is one of sleepy panic. Someone suggests licking sea rocks. Someone else suggests boiling seawater. A third person wonders if salt can be wished into existence. It can't. But hope is cheap. So the elders decide it's time for a salt walk. Which sounds like a trendy urban detox, but is, in fact, a very long, slow journey across the island to the sea locks, where tide pools evaporate slowly, and leave behind salt crystals if you're patient or desperate enough. You volunteer, not because you're brave, but because it's either that or help your cousin weave seabird feathers into cloaks, and you still haven't forgiven him for last summer's sea urchin incident. With a borrowed walking stick and a pouch of oatcakes, you set out. Now here's a historical fact for you to chew on with your oatcake. In the Iron Age, communities in the Hebrides developed complex seasonal migration patterns. They moved between summer and winter dwellings, following pasture, fish, and, you guessed it, salt availability. And here's something even odder. In certain areas, people would roast seaweed over a peat fire just to extract its mineral content, including sodium. Yes, that's right. Roasted seaweed. Not for sushi, but for seasoning. Imagine the sell. Historians still debate whether this method was efficient, or simply a slow form of punishment for those who failed at fishing. You walk past a hollowed-out stone basin, now filled with rainwater and moss. A raven watches from a crooked fence post, judging you probably. Ravens are like that. You offer a polite nod. No one wants to get cursed by a bird. As the day wears on, the land flattens. You reach the tidal edge, where the ocean kisses the island and forgets to leave. The pools here are wide, shallow, and sunlit. When there's sun, which there isn't today, still they shimmer faintly, filled with potential and soggy barnacles. You kneel beside one, feeling the chill through your knees. You scoop a bit of water, let it run over your palm, and taste the wind. Yes, there's salt here. somewhere, if the wind cooperates, and if the sun ever remembers its job. You build a small windbreak of stones and kelp. You light a peat fire, its smoke curling lazily upward like it's in no particular hurry. And then you wait. Waiting, it turns out, is a major activity in ancient Hebridean life. Waiting for tides, for fish, for guests, for storms to pass, for seals to finish sunbathing on your boat. So you wait, and maybe hum a tune, something half remembered from a drunken wedding 2 years ago. Your thoughts drift like sea foam. The salt will come, or it won't, and either way, it'll be a good story. And the raven's still watching. You wake with a stiff neck and a piece of kelp stuck to your cheek. The peat fire has gone out, the tide has come in, and your salt pond, completely refilled with fresh sea water, which means you're back to square one. Nature, it seems, has a sense of humour. A long, slow, soggy joke. You grumble, quietly. You're Hebridean, after all. Public grumbling is reserved for funerals and sheep that escape twice in 1 week. You decide to try again, this time with more rocks and a shallower basin. Maybe even a prayer to some minor salt deity, if you can remember one. You vaguely recall your aunt swearing by a sea spirit named Bride of the Shore, but you also recall her swearing at sheep in the same tone, so it's hard to know if it counts. You wait, again, watching the sea sparkle like it's mocking you personally. To pass the time, you carve small spirals into a piece of driftwood. It doesn't do anything useful, but it makes you feel important, and that in itself is something. By evening, the sun performs a cameo, just long enough to cast golden light across the pools, and you see it, tiny white crystals clinging to the basin edges, like frost, but warmer. Salt. Real salt. Not much, maybe enough to season a single herring, but it's yours, and it's earned. You scrape it up carefully with the edge of a broken shell, a little salty harvest. You hold it in your hand like treasure, which, to be honest, it is. Back in the village, you're greeted like a returning hero, which in Hebridean terms means one person nods and someone offers you half a bannock. High praise. You deposit your salt into the communal pot. It hisses slightly against the warm stew and vanishes into the broth. Just like that, your effort becomes flavour. Memory. Warmth. Tonight the whole village eats together. 1 pot, 10 spoons, no hurry. Someone tells a tale of a selkie who stole a fisherman's pants. Someone else swears they once saw a pig riding a barrel down a stream. No one argues. Stories are sacred here, even the terrible ones. Here's a real historical curiosity for your dreams tonight. Ancient Hebrideans sometimes used animal stomachs as salt containers. Sturdy, waterproof, and, depending on the animal, pre-salted. Efficient and mildly disgusting. There's scholarly disagreement about just how common this was. Some argue it was widespread. Others say it's based on misread translations. Either way, you probably don't want to think too hard about the stew you just ate. After the meal, the fire is stoked. Not for warmth, really. It's summer, barely. But for the comfort of flickering shadows. You sit with your back against a stone wall, watching the light play on the low ceiling. A child falls asleep in your lap. You're not sure whose, doesn't matter. Someone begins a lullaby. The kind that never really ends, just fades slowly into hums, then silence. It's a song about tides and loss and oatcakes, possibly all at once. Your mind drifts. You wonder about other islands, other shores, maybe even a place where salt comes in tiny glass shakers with metal lids and no one thinks twice about it. But that's another world. Here, salt is a gift, a quest, a communal victory. And the raven? Still watching. From a perch above the hearth. You suspect he approves, or maybe he's just waiting for bannock crumbs. Either way, you fall asleep to the sound of soft breathing, crackling peat, and the eternal whisper of the sea outside your walls. Tomorrow someone else will do the salt walk. But tonight you rest, like salt in warm broth. You melt into the day. You wake slowly, not quite sure where you are. The world smells like ash and wool and faintly of yesterday's fish stew. Someone's snoring gently near the hearth, and the early morning light has found a crack in the wall to leak through, just enough to draw a sleepy line across the dirt floor. Your joints ache, but that's not unusual. In the Hebrides, waking without at least one limb complaining is practically suspicious. You stretch, careful not to disturb the sleeping bundle next to you. It might be a child, it might be a dog. Honestly, it's too bundled to tell and you're too polite to ask. Breakfast is thin porridge and silence. the kind of silence that feels more companionable than empty. Outside, a drizzle falls at a 45-degree angle, as it often does here, less falling and more approaching ways with intent. You slip on your cloak, which smells permanently of damp wool and regret. Today you've been asked to help with the salt baskets. Now, this might sound promising. Baskets, perhaps even decorative ones. But no, these are the heavy sodden kinds made for carrying seawater and damp kelp to shallow drying pits. Not woven by elves, woven by your aunt, who insists form follows function, and that pretty is a southern mainland invention. The pits are dug into the ground, lined with cracked pottery and stubborn hope. You fill them with seawater collected from a calm cove nearby. It's laborious work. Walk, fill, haul, pour, repeat. But there's something oddly satisfying about it. Like you're helping the earth season itself. Your hands are numb by the time you're done. The sea does not warm for anyone, not even for people who bring it gifts. A historical tidbit to carry with your numb fingers. In the 8th century, salt production in parts of the British Isles, including these lonely northern reaches, involved shallow clay pans or troughs filled with seawater and left to dry over fire or sun. It was slow, inefficient, and surprisingly effective if you didn't mind your salt occasionally tasting like burnt seaweed and goat. And here's a weird one. There's some evidence that in the Hebrides, people used animal blood in certain preservation methods alongside salt. Dried, mixed, and smeared like an early and deeply off-putting marinade. Historians still debate whether this was culinary genius or a tragic misinterpretation of available ingredients. You decide to skip that particular recipe. As the sun struggles through the clouds, you find a flat stone and sit. The air smells faintly of iodine and smoke. You chew on a strip of dried fish, salty thanks to your recent efforts, and watch a group of children chase a chicken in circles until the chicken wins. You reflect on how salt shapes everything here. It dictates travel, trade, what you eat, and how long you can keep it. It's even used in small ceremonial ways, sprinkled on new boats, or tucked into the walls of new homes. Protection, they say. From what? Everything. There's a short burst of excitement when someone claims they saw a foreign boat rounding the cove. Everyone rushes to look, only to find it's a whale, or a rock that looks like a whale, or perhaps a whale that wants to be a rock. Hard to say. In the Hebrides, news arrives slowly, often sideways and sometimes with fins. As evening falls, you carry more seawater, stoke another peat fire, and sit by the slow-cooking pots as the day fades into amber and then grey. Someone plays a single-note flute with admirable commitment to minimalism. The raven has returned, perched now on a half-burned post near the cooking shelter. You toss it a crumb, it ignores you, perfectly, and you smile. It's been a good day, in that quiet, salty, wind-chafed way that Hebridean days are good. And when you lie down that night, your cloak still damp, your muscles sore, your nose full of kelp smoke, you think about how the smallest things in life are often the hardest to keep, like salt, and warmth, and stories that don't get lost in the wind. The next morning the sky is so bright it feels like a betrayal. Sunlight floods the hillside, making the wet grass sparkle like it's trying too hard. You squint against the light as if it's a guest who's arrived too early for dinner. Everyone in the village is pretending to enjoy it, but you can tell they're suspicious. A sky this clear feels unnatural. Like the island's been swapped with one from a romance poem. Still, it is good for salt. Very good. Today you're helping lay out the drying cloths stretched on wide wooden frames, covered in a patchy woven fabric that's somewhere between burlap and canvas. These will be used to filter and dry the final salt from brine that's been cooked down. Your task: pour the brine, smooth the cloths, and keep the chickens from walking across the whole operation like they own it. They do not, but try telling them that. While you work, someone's grandmother tells the story of the time the salt pile caught fire. You're not sure how salt burns, but she's adamant. Also adamant, it happened because someone brought in salt from the mainland, and it was too soft. Mainland things, she insists, are soft, like cheese and promises. A child asks if you can use tears for salt. It's not a bad idea, honestly, certainly more abundant. You pause to breathe it all in, the sun-warmed cloth, the tang of brine, the distant moo of a cow that always sounds personally offended. Everything here happens slowly, but not without purpose. Here's something historical to chew on while you swat at a fly. Salt was so important in ancient Celtic culture that it appears in their myths, poetry, and legal codes. In some regions, it was even used as a form of currency, more reliable than promises of future fish, and easier to carry than cows. And this obscure fact, some Hebridean communities used dried seafoam residue as a trace salt additive. Yes, seafoam, like ocean spit, scooped, dried and sprinkled, because when you run out of options, creativity rises. Historians, as usual, disagree on whether this was widespread practice or one community's short-lived culinary panic. Back in the now, a wind kicks up, sending one of your drying cloths sailing into a gorse bush. You retrieve it with minimal injury and maximum muttering. Later, someone from the next island over arrives with news. Their salt pile has burned, somehow. You exchange glances with the grandmother, who nods like a prophet fulfilled. The traveller trades you a slab of dried venison for a pouch of your island's salt. She tastes it, nods. "It's good," she says, sharp, earthy, a little smoky. She asks if you roast it with driftwood. You lie and say yes. You don't, but now you're thinking about it. Trade continues long into the afternoon. Salt for meat, salt for wool, salt for a broken iron brooch that someone swears belonged to a saint. Probably didn't. Still, it's shiny. As night falls, the salt is gathered. Cloth shaken out, stones scraped clean, baskets filled with crystals that sparkle under the moonlight. You carry one, heavy and satisfying, back to the storehouse. The raven follows, a fan apparently. Tonight there's laughter in the longhouse. A new story is told about a man who tried to catch fish using only curses and bread. He caught one, and lost his dignity. You lie back, listening to the sea breathe and the fire whisper. Your hands still smell like salt and smoke. You think, the island is quiet, but it's never still. Tomorrow there will be more water to carry, more baskets, more tiny miracles of evaporation and patience. But for now, sleep. You've earned it. And the raven agrees. You rise before the sun this time, or maybe the sun is simply being lazy. It has that habit here, like an unreliable friend who shows up late and leaves early. The sky is still a deep grey blue and the ground is damp with the kind of dew that feels personal. Your feet are cold before you take your second step. Today is a special kind of quiet, the sort of quiet that has weight. You feel it pressing softly on your chest as you make your way out of the longhouse, brushing aside a hanging strip of seal leather that serves as both door and draught deterrent. Outside, a low mist coils along the earth, veiling the path ahead. You're headed inland for a change. Not for salt this time, but for wood. Because salt, despite its slow glamour, demands fire, and fire needs fuel, and fuel in the Hebrides is just another thing the wind doesn't want you to have. The island has few trees. Those that remain are twisted, defiant things, bent sideways by wind and time like elders with strong opinions. Most firewood comes from driftwood, peat, or whatever can be stolen from fate without too much consequence. Today, you're gathering bogwood, long-buried trees preserved in ancient peat, dark as tar and stubborn as memory. You carry a wicker basket. Your cousin carries a small axe and a large complaint about his breakfast. Together, you trudge toward the bogs, your boots squelching in time with your thoughts. Here's a fact worth savouring. In the Hebrides, peat wasn't just fuel, it was practically infrastructure. People used it for walls, floors, insulation, and even makeshift furniture. Entire lifetimes ran on peat. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, like a good raincoat or a bad marriage. You find the bogwood half buried beneath a mat of moss. It takes effort to unearth, digging with your hands, muttering with your back. Eventually, you free a gnarled, blackened log, older than memory. The wood smells faintly of rot and something sweet, like time left out in the rain. Your cousin wants to make a joke about it being haunted. You beat him to it. Some scholars believe that bogwood was deliberately buried centuries ago as part of ritual offerings. Others think that's a romantic misreading of ancient deforestation. Either way, it burns hot, and you need it. On the walk back, a light rain begins to fall, the kind that seems to come from all directions at once, including up. You pull your cloak tighter and daydream about dry feet, possibly the rarest thing in Hebridean history. Back in the village, the peat fires are lit. The bogwood you brought hisses and smokes, filling the longhouse with a scent that is, frankly, suspicious. But it burns hot and steady. That's enough. Dinner is more stew. It's always stew. You don't complain. You've tasted stew without salt before. It's like punishment with a ladle. And here's a cultural tidbit to chew while you stir your bowl. In parts of the Hebrides, salt was once believed to ward off fairies, not the friendly glittery kind. The other kind, the ones who stole your livestock, soured your milk, and occasionally replaced your baby with a sack of moss. A pinch of salt at the doorstep was a charm against such inconveniences. Tonight you leave a tiny pile of salt outside the door, not because you believe in changelings, but because the wind has been odd lately, and because you're not in the mood to raise a moss baby. You sleep deeply, the kind of sleep that feels earned, as though your bones thank you for not asking anything more of them. The raven sleeps too, perched above the door, one eye open, always watching. You're woken not by light, but by laughter. A rare sound, even rarer before breakfast. You roll over, groggy, and squint toward the longhouse entrance. There's a commotion outside. Laughter, shouting, and something that sounds suspiciously like a goat in distress. You step out and immediately regret it. The ground is wet. Again, the sky is grey. Again. But what's different is the sight before you. A trader's boat has arrived, and with it, strangers. The boat itself is nothing spectacular. A rough wooden skiff, patched and salt-stained, moored just off the pebbled shore. But the people climbing out are cause for celebration. They bring goods, news, and possibly more salt. The village gathers quickly. People straighten their tunics. Someone pretends not to be holding a live eel. Children practice looking unimpressed, then immediately fail. You spot the trader, a tall woman with sea-bleached hair, a bag of goods slung across her back, and an air of someone who's bartered in worse places. She greets your village elder with a nod, then opens her sack with a theatrical flair that might actually be sarcasm. Out come the treasures: bronze pins, sheep cheese wrapped in moss, strange herbs, a small mirror, and yes, 2 fat leather pouches of salt. The good stuff, mainland stuff, sharp, dry, crystalline, the kind that doesn't smell like smoked haddock and ghost trees. A murmur of reverence passes through the crowd. It's like watching royalty unpack their lunch. The bartering begins. Salt for wool, salt for stories, salt for a clay amulet someone swears is magical, despite the suspicious thumbprint. You approach cautiously, offering a length of driftwood polished to a fine sheen. The trader examines it, sniffs it, taps it against her boot, then shrugs. A deal. You now own a small pouch of mainland salt. It feels heavier than it should. Sacred almost. You tuck it into your cloak and immediately begin fantasizing about what to put it on. Everything, maybe even your cousin. Here's a historical nugget to season your thoughts. Salt was one of the few substances to move regularly between islands and the mainland in the ancient Hebridean trade. Despite the rough seas and unpredictable weather, traders braved the passage because demand never wavered. Salt, like gossip, travels. And this strange but true fact: in some early Hebridean funerary practices, bodies were rubbed with salt before burial. Scholars aren't entirely sure if this was for preservation, purification, or just habit. Opinions differ, and the dead aren't saying much. The rest of the day is a blur of small deals, excited chatter, and the occasional goat-related mishap. You end up with a new pair of woolen socks, a mysterious route labelled only for dreams, and a recipe for salted turnip cake that might be a prank. That night the village hosts a feast. Not a grand one, just slightly more food, slightly more warmth, and more toasts than usual. Someone sings a ballad about a man who fell in love with a fishwife and drowned trying to impress her with a bucket of salt. The ending is ambiguous. The moral is unclear. You sprinkle a few grains of your precious new salt into your stew. It sings, not literally, of course, but something in the flavour hums against your teeth. Later, by the fire, the trader tells a story about a place farther south, where salt is mined from great hills of stone and the air stings your eyes. You listen, half dreaming, imagining a world where salt is so abundant you can walk on it barefoot. Here it still costs sweat, time, and occasionally your dignity, but tonight it tastes like triumph, and you fall asleep wondering what else might be worth carrying across the sea. The raven watches from the rafters, 1 foot tucked beneath its feathers. Dreaming maybe, or plotting. You dream of endless white plains, vast stretches of salt under a golden sky, crunching beneath your bare feet like brittle snow. In the distance someone waves from the top of a dune, holding a wooden spoon. You wake just as they start to speak. The real world, by contrast, is damp. Always damp. The inside of your cloak is somehow wetter than the outside, which feels like a personal insult. Still, it's a good morning. The kind where the mist is gentle, the air tastes of sea and moss, and no one's shouting about escaped livestock. Yet. You decide to visit the high ground today. Not for salt, not for bogwood, just for the view. A luxury, yes, but even ancient Hebrideans needed the occasional break. The hill is called Cnoc Nan Ron, Seal Hill. No one remembers why exactly, don't we? There are no seals up there, just grass, rocks, and a few stories that might be true. As you climb, the air sharpens. The sound of the village fades behind you. The cluck of hens, the low rumble of gossip, the occasional indignant bleat. Ahead, only sky. At the top, you sit on a warm stone. The island stretches beneath you, brown and green and endless, bordered by that ever-restless sea. From up here, you can just make out the salt pits, small and shining like forgotten coins. You think about how many footsteps it has taken to keep those pits filled, how many hands carried sea, wood, fire, and patience. Here's something to let roll around in your mind like a pebble in your pocket. In ancient Celtic tradition, salt was associated with the soul. It was believed to preserve not just meat, but memory. That salted food could carry not just nourishment, but intan. To eat someone's salted stew was to carry a piece of them with you. You squint toward the mainland. It's out there somewhere, hidden behind haze and distance. The place where salt arrives in tidy pouches and people probably don't name hills after marine mammals they've never seen. You notice not far from your perch a ring of stones, weathered, mossy and half-sunken. Not large enough to be a proper circle, not random enough to be accidental. A hearth perhaps, or a shrine, or just a forgotten picnic. Scholars still argue about such things. Some say every stone ring is sacred. Others say people just like sitting in circles. You run your hand along the lichen. It's soft, almost like velvet. A green so muted that it barely feels like a colour. You wonder who sat here last. A shepherd? A trader? Someone with a secret recipe for salted porridge? Down in the valley, smoke curls from the longhouse chimney. A sign of life, or stew, or both. You pick your way back down the hill slowly, like time doesn't matter, which here it really doesn't. The sea runs everything on its own schedule, and you've learned that clocks are best used as weights to hold cloth down. Back in the village, the trader's boat is gone. A piece of rope still curls near the mooring stone like a lazy goodbye. Someone mentioned she left a gift, a small jar of yellowish salt said to come from the south, where the earth is red and the wind smells like lemons. You have no idea what a lemon is, but you're intrigued. The salt sits in the elder's hut now, guarded like a relic. No one's tasted it yet. There's talk of saving it for something special. No one defines special, of course. That's part of the tradition. You spend the rest of the evening mending baskets with your cousin, who swears loudly every time a reed snaps. You tell him about the hill. He tells you he saw the raven steal a bannock from the windowsill. Neither of you knows if the other is lying. You both agree that salt tastes better when stolen or shared. And the day ends, as it often does, with tired feet, warm firelight, and the scent of something ancient simmering in a pot. Sleep comes easily tonight. You dream of lemon wind. You wake to bird song. Actual bird song. Not the usual gull shriek or raven scoff, but something light and melodic drifting through the thatch like a lullaby in reverse. You lie still for a moment, savouring it. The world feels briefly clean, as though something has been wiped down and reset. But of course it hasn't. The longhouse still smells like peat and socks. Outside, a dog is chasing something invisible, and your breakfast is, predictably, porridge. Still, there's something new in the air today, a ripple of curiosity. A rare event is approaching, salt weighing day. Now don't get too excited. This isn't a festival, no banners, no dancing. Just an old log, a few rusty scales, and the chance to argue politely about how much salt belongs to whom. See, the salt gathered over the past month must be divided among households. Fairly, or at least with the appearance of fairness. The elders oversee it, with the patience of stones and the diplomacy of tired parents. Everyone gathers near the storehouse. A few chickens sneak in and are politely escorted out. The weighing begins. You watch as baskets are tipped, contents scraped and measured. Names are called. Tiny leather pouches are handed over like sacred relics. The measurements are more symbolic than precise. This is a place where people remember who gave what and who didn't. Your household gets a good share, better than expected. You suspect your grandmother's special oat cakes may have had something to do with it. Bribery, but artisanal. Here's a grounding historical fact. While large-scale salt trade existed across Britain, island communities like this one relied on communal production and distribution. Hoarding salt was frowned upon, seen as selfish and in some tales unlucky. Salt, like stories and fire, was meant to circulate. And here's a stranger detail. In some Hebridean households, salt was stored in carved sheep horns, sealed with wax and wrapped in wool. Decorative? Maybe. Or maybe just practical. Historians can't agree if it was custom or coincidence. After the weighing, someone tries to start a song. It turns into a debate about whether the chorus has 2 or 3 lines. The song dies peacefully. You wander back toward the coast, pouch of salt in hand. It jingles faintly. Not a lot of salt, but enough to season, preserve, trade, or toss over your shoulder if you feel a curse coming on. Near the salt pits, you see a girl arranging shells in a spiral. Not for ritual, just for fun. Maybe it'll become a ritual someday. That's how things start here. Slowly, without asking permission. You sit nearby, watching the tide creep in. A seal bobs in the water, blinking at you like it knows everything. You nod back. Later, you trade a pinch of salt for a slice of honeyed oat cake. It's too sweet, but you eat it anyway. Generosity, like salt, improves most things. That night, the elder brings out the southern salt, the yellow one. A special moment, apparently. She dips a finger in, tastes it, nods solemnly, then laughs. "It tastes like eggs," she says, and everyone sighs. The mystery is over. Still, you each get a grain to taste. Yours is sharp, tangy, strange in a way that feels exciting and wrong. You like it, a little. You go to bed with salt on your lips and laughter in your chest. The raven steals nothing tonight. Maybe it's full, or maybe it's waiting for something even more valuable. You wake with a full belly and a vague sense of optimism. This is rare. You lie still for a while, trying not to ruin it by thinking too hard. Outside, a fine mist is falling, almost decorative. The kind of rain that doesn't soak you, just gently reminds you who's in charge. You rise, stretch, and step out into the day. Today is a tools and repairs day, which, in your village, means several hours spent staring at cracked pots, fraying ropes, bent fish hooks, and hoping someone else fixes them first. Your own task is modest. Repair the salt frames. These wooden frames, long, low, and awkwardly built, hold the woven drying cloths that catch evaporated salt. They are lashed together with kelp string and stubbornness, and after several weeks of sun, wind, and chickens, they've started to lean, like elderly farmers at a wedding. You grab your toolkit, a dull knife, a rock that's sort of a hammer, and a handful of bent nails that have seen better centuries. The salt frames wait for you, damp and judgmental. You get to work, slowly, because speed ruins everything here, including your knuckles. Here's a salt-scented historical nugget. In ancient Hebridean communities, tools weren't always passed down through families. They were shared across households, especially those connected to vital processes like salt harvesting, fishing, and food preservation. The idea of personal ownership was flexible. If your neighbour needed a chisel, you lent it. If you broke it, you both muttered about fate and got on with it. That sense of shared burden was both practical and cultural. Salt was communal. So were the tools, so were the blisters. You drive a nail into a crooked joint. The wood splinters a little. You pretend not to see it. The raven, perched nearby, definitely sees it. Somewhere behind you a pot shatters. Someone swears. A goat runs through the square, wearing a scarf. No one reacts. Midway through your repairs, your cousin shows up. He says he's helping. He isn't. He's mostly offering opinions and getting in the way. But conversation helps pass the time. You talk about the last salt walk. He claims he once saw a white seal with golden eyes while gathering brine. You raise an eyebrow. He insists it happened. You let it go. Stories here are half truth, half boredom, and all survival. Eventually, the frames are upright again. Wobbling slightly, but no worse than usual. You both sit back to admire the work. Or rather, the fact that the work is no longer your problem. Here's a weird fact to salt your thoughts. In some Hebridean oral traditions, salt was said to carry voices. Whispers between lovers, curses from enemies, even prayers for the dead, all stored in salt and released with the right ritual. There's no clear record of how this was proven, but several songs make reference to listening stones near salt pits. Historians naturally disagree, some call it folklore, others suggest it's a poetic memory of ancient communication, smoke, wind, and the occasional yelling match across the moor. You look at the salt pits now, glinting faintly in the low light. Could they carry your thoughts too? You whisper something into the wind, just to see. It doesn't answer. But a gull screeches above you, and you decide that's probably unrelated. That night a storm rolls in. Not violent, just loud. The kind that rattles shutters and fills dreams with wind. You curl beneath your blanket, listening. And you think of the salt frames, holding steady, at least for now. The morning after the storm smells like earth and something slightly burnt. The longhouse is damp. Your socks are soaked. And your mood is, let's call it reflective. Outside you find that the salt pits have survived. Mostly. A few are flooded. One of the cloth frames has collapsed entirely, its legs sticking up like a spider that gave up mid-dance. You sigh, then you laugh. It's either that or cry, and laughter is easier to clean up. Today's task is recovery, which sounds dramatic but really just means scoop water, salvage what's left, rebuild what's not too soggy to touch. Your hands are numb within the hour. While scraping up ruined brine, you find something odd. A small charm, half buried in the mud. It's a carved piece of bone, shaped like a spiral. Could be a necklace. Could be a game piece. Could be cursed. You wipe it clean and pocket it anyway. That's the thing about life here. Things get buried, forgotten, then unearthed again with no context. A tool becomes a relic. A toy becomes an omen. A broken salt spoon becomes a reason to gather the whole village and tell stories until the meaning settles. Here's your scholarly seasoning for the day. Archaeological digs on Hebridean islands have turned up small spiral-shaped bone charms dated to the Iron Age. Some were found near salt-drying areas. Their exact purpose? Still debated. Protection? Ritual? Decoration? All of the above? Maybe none. What we do know, these people didn't waste much, as every object pulled double or triple duty. Even the broken ones told stories. You keep the charm, just in case. By midday the wind calms. The salt pits are mended again. The collapsed frame has been lashed back into shape, reinforced with extra peat sod and a kind of hopeful glaring. You sit down near the fire with the elders. They are discussing the coming equinox, and whether it's early, late or indifferent. One of them says the wind has changed direction. Another says her knees predicted that 2 weeks ago. Everyone nods solemnly. In the Hebrides, weather is a shared relative. Beloved, unpredictable, and always a topic of conversation. Someone brings out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, tiny salt cakes, baked yesterday before the storm. They're hard, flat, and a bit like licking the side of a boat, but they're salty, and you appreciate the effort. A child approaches and asks if you know how salt is made on the moon. You blink. She says she dreamed it last night. Silver crystals falling like snow into a crater where cows float in circles. You nod. Say that's probably true. Why not? Salt comes from all kinds of places. Before bed, you take out the spiral charm again. Hold it up to the firelight. Catches a glow. You think about the people who lived here before you, long before you. Did they wake up sore? Did their salt frames collapse in the wind? Did they ever get the chance to stop and feel proud? Probably not, but maybe. You sleep with the charm under your pillow, just in case it dreams too. And outside, under the rattling stars, the raven perches in its usual spot. Still watching, still waiting, probably judging your craftsmanship. The wind has shifted again. You can tell the moment you open your eyes, not by the sound, but by the smell. It carries more salt today, not the homegrown kind, the sharper, flintier scent of sea spray and foreign shores. The elders say it means someone is coming. You pull on your cloak, still damp of course, and step outside. The horizon is a line of soft grey. The village is already stirring, the air filled with quiet energy. Like everyone's holding their breath, but politely. You walk down toward the southern beach. The stones underfoot are slick with algae and memory. That's where you see it. A dark shape far out at sea. Long, low, moving slow as thought. A boat, larger than the trader's skiff from before. Its sail is red, or was once, now faded to the colour of blood mixed with fog. A crew of 4 or 5, hard to tell in the haze, but definitely not local. The village elder appears beside you. She doesn't say anything, just watches, then mutters, "Well, Let's see if they're salted or sweet. She means, are they here to trade or trouble? In the Hebrides, that line is often blurred. The boat beaches at low tide. The crew steps off wary, windswept but not armed. Their leader is a man with hair like seaweed and a beard full of shells. Whether that's intentional or poor grooming, no one's sure. They bring gifts, dried berries, a strange oil that smells of smoke and apples, and most importantly blocks of salt. Square, white, pressed into neat little bricks. Mainland salt, trade salt. The kind that doesn't flake or melt when you look at it funny. You offer them smoked fish in return, a few lengths of wool, a carved bone charm, not your spiral one, a different one, you're not reckless. They accept. Here's your historical seasoning. Compressed salt bricks were used as standard trade units in many ancient societies. In the Hebrides, such bricks were prized not just for their purity, but for their stackability. You could build small walls with them, temporary ones, of course, but still the architecture of appetite. And for the curious, in one Hebridean folk tale, a salt brick was used as a pillow by a travelling bard. He claimed it helped him dream in rhyme. He also forgot his own name for 3 days. Interpret that how you like. That evening, the strangers share stories around the fire. Their language is close to yours but slippery, like sea glass. You understand most of it, especially the laughter. They describe storms that cracked their mast, islands where salt is black, a man who tried to sell them a salt pig, which turned out to be just a very stubborn pig. You offer your own tales, of the raven, of the salt pit that burst into flame, of the time someone tried to flavour stew with crushed seashells and nearly started a family feud. By nightfall, the air is thick with smoke, salt, and the low hum of contentment. You sleep near the fire that night, wrapped in the comfort of shared stories and well-traded goods. Your spiral charm rests beside you. The raven watches from the beams, and for once it doesn't look entirely unimpressed. The next morning is quiet in that post-visitor way, the kind of hush that follows too much laughter, too many stories, and just enough shared salt to leave the pots a little empty. The strangers are gone. They left before dawn, riding the tide like ghosts with good timing. All they left behind, a length of unfamiliar rope, the faint smell of smoked apple, and a small stack of salt bricks, 3 to be precise, tucked near the longhouse like a gifter payment. You help carry them to the storehouse. They're heavier than they look, dense, dry, and perfect, like little monuments to everything you can't make yourself. Inside the storehouse, the elder decides to use one of them today, not for stew, for ceremony. You blink. Ceremony? Yes. Today is a naming day. One of the village babies is finally getting a name. It took a while. Hebrideans do not rush such things. A name is a serious matter. Like salt, it must be earned and occasionally stirred. The ceremony is simple. Everyone gathers. A fire is lit. The elder sprinkles 3 grains of the good salt into the flame, which crackles like it understands the significance. The child is held up squirming and only mildly sticky. The name is spoken, Isla. It means from the strong place. Everyone nods, approves. Then, in a tradition that predates even the elder's memory, the baby's lips are touched with salt, just a tiny pinch, enough to link her to the earth, the sea, and the promise of food with flavour. A historical taste for you. In many ancient Celtic and Norse traditions, salt was used during name-giving or blessing ceremonies. It symbolized purity, permanence, and the bond between child and community. Not just seasoning, but sacrament. And here's a stranger one. In one preserved Hebridean folktale, it's said that a baby who sneezes after tasting salt will grow into a poet. If they hiccup, they'll become a fisherman. If they do both, they'll probably leave the island. Ayla does neither. She blinks, hiccups, and then immediately sneezes. Everyone gasps. You consider making a joke, but the raven flaps down and lands behind the baby. Like punctuation. No one says anything for a long moment. Then the elder laughs. "Two futures," she says. "We'll see which one the wind favors." Later that day, you help bury one of the salt bricks beneath the hearthstone of the longhouse. Another tradition. Salt for protection, stability, a promise not to drift too far. You wonder how many bricks are hidden under other homes. How much salt has been used to anchor memory, not just mutton. You lie in bed that night, the smell of ceremony still in your hair. Smoke, salt, a whisper of something new. You dream of names you've never heard, of songs that rhyme too well, of a future that tastes like both storm and stew. It rains again the next morning, but it's a soft sort of rain, the kind that falls politely, like it doesn't want to wake anyone. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside, where the village has been reduced to various shades of brown and grey, punctuated by the occasional squawking hen with a sense of purpose. Today is not a salt day. Not entirely. Today is a fish day, which, on this island, is also inevitably a salt day. You're headed to the shore to help gut, clean, and pack the most recent haul into brine barrels. The process is rhythmic, meditative even, or it would be if not for the gulls screaming like tiny, airborne lawyers arguing about inheritance rights. You join the others by the smokehouse. The morning catch lies in a pile gleaming and cold-eyed, waiting for their second life as preserved winter food. First comes the cleaning, then the layering. Fish, salt, like a grim, scaly cake. Each layer pressed down with a flat stone, the barrels sealed tight with leather and good intentions. Here's your historical pinch of salt. The practice of preserving fish in brine, especially herring, was well established in the Hebrides by the early medieval period. Salted fish were a lifeline during the long winters, and barrels of preserved herring became a kind of edible currency, traded far and wide. And a curious tidbit, in some island communities, fish were packed with herbs and seaweed, not just salt. There's a recorded tradition, possibly apocryphal, of one village flavouring its fish with crushed dulse and meadowsweet, a combination described in one later account as strangely floral, vaguely angry. Historians, as usual, remain divided. Some claim it was a delicacy. Others suspect it was the result of someone misreading a cooking charm. You pause to stretch your back, brushing salt from your sleeves. The brine stings the small cuts on your fingers. It's a sharp, living pain, a reminder that preservation isn't gentle, it's work. Hard, repetitive, necessary work. Your cousin jokes that your hands smell like a mermaid's regret. You reply that his smell like old boots and disappointment. The gulls seem to agree with both assessments. As the sun rises, the barrels are stacked neatly against the stone wall. They'll sit there for months now, fermenting slightly, improving like a story with every retelling. Back at the longhouse, someone's making flatbread. The air smells of fire and flour and just a hint of fish. You eat slowly, your body tired but pleased. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing your labour will feed others when the days grow short. Later, the elder gathers a few of you to discuss the salt supply again. One of the bricks has gone missing. This is not cause for panic, yet. Items vanish in the Hebrides like mist over stone quickly, without reason, and usually turning up 2 weeks later in someone's boot. Still, the disappearance of a salt brick is notable. You offer to search the old stone ring up the hill, the one where you found your spiral charm, just in case. You climb slowly. The wind hums at your ears, low and steady. When you reach the top, the ring looks the same, quiet, innocent, watching. You walk around it once, twice, nothing. Then, tucked beneath a mossy rock, a tiny trail of salt. Not a brick. Just flakes. Crumbs, really. You kneel, pick up a few, taste them. They're different, earthier, not from your village stock. Imported or old. You pocket a few for later, not because they're useful, but because something in you insists they might be important. The raven appears again, silent as shadow. It doesn't speak, but it does tilt its head in that way that means you should probably keep walking. You take the hint. Back in the village, the missing brick is found. Someone's dog had dragged it into the byre. No one's surprised. The dog is smug for the rest of the day. You go to bed with fish on your hands, salt in your pocket, and a sense that something is shifting. Whether it's the wind or something deeper, you're not sure. But it feels like the kind of shift that leaves stories behind. You don't wake gently. Not today. Instead, your dreams end abruptly, replaced by shouting, clanging, and the unmistakable noise of a goat on a roof. You stumble out of the longhouse, cloak half on, hair doing its best impression of coastal shrubbery. The goat is indeed on the roof. No one knows how it got there. No one knows how to get it down. You look at the goat. The goat looks at you. Then it bleats loudly, as if demanding salt for its troubles. You make a note to offer it some later. But today's real task has nothing to do with goats. It's about salt paths. Your village has been asked to help clear the old trail-and overgrown footpath that once connected the salt pits to the far eastern cove. It hasn't been used in years, maybe decades. But now, with the recent trades and visitors, someone decided it should be reopened. The logic is murky. The labor is not. You pack a satchel with flatbread, dried apples, and a sliver of cheese that's seen better weeks. Then you set off, machete in hand, boots already regretting the decision. The path winds through low hills and thick gorse. You hack, you duck, you step in something unidentifiable. But slowly the path reveals itself. Stones placed long ago to mark the way. Half-buried posts. A stretch of charred earth that suggests an old campfire or a very unlucky sheep. Here's your historical footnote. In many Hebridean regions, specific paths were used seasonally to transport salt to outer settlements. These routes often predated the villages themselves, marked by cairns, standing stones, and folklore. Walking them wasn't just travel, it was tradition, a kind of pilgrimage with sacks instead of prayers. And here's a weirder note. One such salt path, according to a 17th century record, was cursed to vanish in fog. Travellers claimed the stones would disappear beneath their feet, only to reappear behind them. Some say it was just poor navigation. Others blame spirits with poor directional etiquette. As you clear a bend in the trail, you come across something unexpected. A stone bench. Just sitting there, weather-worn, moss-covered, oddly well-placed. You sit, obviously. It's cool beneath you, comforting. You eat your old cheese, share a crumb with a passing bird. It doesn't thank you. And you think about all the feet that walked this trail, all the salt carried on shoulders and backs, all the quiet determination it took to season someone else's winter. You rise again and continue clearing. By late afternoon, you reach the eastern cove. It's quiet here. Waves break gently on smooth stones. A few seals watch you from the water, looking suspiciously like floating potatoes. You place a small pile of fresh salt on a flat rock, a gesture, a nod to the ones who walked before you. Then you begin the journey back. At the village, the goat is off the roof. No one knows how it got down. It looks smug. That night, the elder asks if the path is clear. You say yes. She nods, says nothing else. But she slips you a strip of venison jerky later. That's Hebridean for good work. You go to sleep with the ache of honest labor in your bones, the taste of salt still in your mouth, and a strange sense of direction that doesn't feel entirely yours. As you drift off, you wonder, how many other paths are waiting under bramble and memory? And who else might be walking them? The days are growing shorter now. You notice it first, not in the light, but in the sounds, the way the birds quiet earlier, the way voices carry longer through the village, softened by the dusk. Even the sea seems to hush itself, like it's bracing for a change. It's almost the autumn turning. Soon, the equinox will mark the slow retreat into the dark half of the year. You wake up to the smell of smoke, and damp wool too of the Hebrides' most enduring perfume sand. Make your way to the gathering square. Today, you've been invited to participate in what the elder calls the salt reconciliation. You nod, like you know what that means. You do not. Turns out, once every season, the village holds a reckoning not for crimes, but for misunderstandings. A formal day to clear the air, to settle who borrowed whose spoon and didn't return it, who salted whose stew too generously, who took more than their share of the communal brine. The idea is simple: keep the salt clean and the community cleaner. You stand in a loose circle with everyone else. The elder stands in the center, holding a shallow clay bowl filled with salt water, clear, cold and still. One by one, people step forward, speak their piece, then touch the water with 2 fingers and smear a bit on their forehead. It's symbolic, naturally, but also a little awkward. Especially when one man confesses to over-salting the dried fish 3 weeks ago as a lesson. He is forgiven, reluctantly. Here's a thoughtful historical flake. In several Gaelic-speaking regions, salt was seen as a spiritual cleanser. Touching salt water was thought to purify intentions, particularly during seasonal rituals tied to agricultural or maritime cycles. The act itself didn't erase mistakes, but it signaled a willingness to begin again, which is about all anyone can ask for, really. And here's something stranger still. Some Hebridean fishing villages once performed salt blessing rituals before setting out to sea, drawing protective spirals in the sand with wet fingers. If the spiral held its shape after a wave passed, the journey would be safe. If it vanished, you'd better have a backup plan. Back in your village, the ritual ends with shared bread, unsalted, of course. It's meant to be humble, grounding, equalizing. It also tastes like regret. You chew it anyway. Afterward, you find yourself walking alone down the coast, where the wind has softened and the tide is midway out. You follow the same steps your great-grandmother likely walked, boots pressing into sand that remembers everything. You pass the salt pits. The cloth frames are covered for the season, their work nearly done. Only a few pans remain active, now just enough for late harvesting. You stop and kneel beside one, dipping your finger into the last traces of brine. It's cool and sharp, like waking up from a good dream too soon. You wonder what reconciliation really means here, whether the salt remembers the truth, whether it forgives. On your way back, you see the raven again. This time, it's perched beside your door, head tilted, looking less judgmental and more curious. You nod. It blinks once, then flies off, trailing a single black feather that lands near your foot. You pick it up, tuck it into your belt. You've collected stranger things. That night, the longhouse is quieter than usual. The fire is low. The air carries the smell of seaweed, dusk, and just a hint of something burnt, but in a good way. You fall asleep thinking not of the salt pits or the fish barrels, but of the people, these tired, stubborn, quietly generous souls who salt not just food, but days. And somewhere, gently, the island exhales. The next day arrives, wrapped in fog. A thick, wet curtain that rolls down from the hills and settles like a secret across the village. Sound moves oddly in this weather. Distant voices echo close. Nearby footsteps vanish. You like it. The fog makes everything feel ancient, like you've stepped sideways into an older version of the island, where every rock still believes it's a god, and salt is the only thing keeping the world from floating apart. Today's task is an easy one: candle making. Now, before you roll your eyes, know this: candles here are not simple. They're short, smoky, and incredibly stubborn. They smell of tallow, peat ash, and occasionally goat, depending on where the fat came from. And yet, they are precious. You join a small group in the workshop where iron pans bubble with melted fat and strips of wick hang from a wooden frame like damp seaweed. The process is meditative. Dip dry. Dip dry. Slowly the shape forms, layer by layer, like trust. Here's your historical illumination. In many Hebridean homes, salt was added to the final cooling wax of tallow candles, not for scent, but preservation. A pinch of salt could help harden the wax, extend its life, and according to some keep the wick from flickering when spirits were near. A lovely thought, if you're in the mood to have your evening haunted by a flickering salt candle. And here's an odd little tale. On the Isle of Barra, it was said that if you stared at a salt-hardened candle flame without blinking, you could see who was thinking about you. This led to a lot of staring and a lot of arguments. By midday, your fingers are stiff, waxy, and surprisingly proud. You've made 6 candles, none of them pretty, all of them functional. You trade one for a wool mitten with mismatched thumbs. It's a good trade. Later, as the fog lifts slightly, a traveller arrives. Alone, wearing blue wool and a tired expression. She carries a bundle of herbs, a knife with a bone handle, and a small vial of something clear. When asked, she says she's come to pay a debt to the sea. No one asks further. You watch her walk down to the cove. She stands there for a long time, staring at the tide. Then she kneels, opens the vial, and pours it out. It smells like vinegar and salt. A gesture, maybe. A memory. A farewell. When she leaves, she gives you a small pouch. Inside, black salt. The kind made by slow-burning kelp and peat together, carefully sifted and ground. It tastes like fire and forgetting. You store it in a clay jar with your other treasures. A feather, a shard of glass, that old bone spiral. Objects that whisper, but don't explain. That night, you light one of your new candles. It burns with a steady flame. No flickers, no ghosts. Just light, soft and simple, brushing the walls like a lullaby made of smoke. You fall asleep before it finishes burning. Dreamless. Content. Held. The wind howls overnight. You wake to the sound of the shutters creaking, the longhouse groaning like it's had a bad dream and isn't ready to talk about it yet. Outside, the sea crashes louder than usual. Angry, insistent, like someone banging pots to announce a storm that's already here. You pull on your cloak, which smells faintly of fish, and triumphant step into the bluster. The salt pans are no use today. The wind would lift the cloth frames into the sky like wayward kites. The brine would vanish before it even thought of crystallizing. So today becomes an inside day. Well, mostly. The elder has decided it's time to check on the old storehouse, a stone-walled building up the hill, barely used except when the newer storehouse gets too full or when someone remembers it exists. It's always slightly damp, always slightly leaning, and always slightly suspicious. You volunteer to go. Of course you do. You and 2 others set off, squinting into the sideways rain. The grass slaps at your shins. The hill path is less of a path, and more of a collection of hopeful stones. You reach the storehouse after what feels like 3 seasons and a minor personal journey. It looks exactly as you remember it, lopsided, mossy, and emitting an aura of dignified neglect. You unlatch the creaking door. Inside, the air is thick, not unpleasant, just full of time. Shelves line the walls, some empty, others holding sealed jars, bundles of dried herbs, and what appears to be a carved turnip wearing a tiny cloak. You choose not to ask. Here's a historical flavor. In older Hebridean settlements, salt was stored not only for food but also for medicine. Salt infusions were used to treat wounds, ward off spirits, and in some cases soften stubborn cheeses. The storehouse often doubled as an apothecary, or a panic room, depending on the mood of the sea. You find several pouches of salt tucked into a wooden box, labeled with symbols you can't read. One pouch crumbles at your touch. Another is still soft and dry, protected by careful wrapping and luck. The real treasure, though, lies beneath a broken beam, a long, flat slab of stone engraved with spiral patterns. Your companions stare. You stare. No one says anything for a long moment. Finally, someone whispers, "Is it a salt map?" Which is ridiculous. But also, maybe not. You brush away the dirt. The spirals form a clear path like a trail across water. There are small carvings at intervals, waves, fish, tiny flames, and in the center, a sun. The elder, when you return, doesn't even blink. She says, "Ah, you found the stone." You wait for more. She says nothing, so you stare at her. She finally adds, "We used to follow it, when the sea got strange, when we needed answers." You ask where it leads. She shrugs. Inward, outward, same thing. That night, the wind dies down. The sea settles. You dream of the stone. You dream of spirals turning under your feet, of salt leading you somewhere not found on any map, and you wake with the feeling that you've already begun walking. You rise before the sun. Not out of virtua, your blanket has a mysterious damp patch, and your pillow has vanished. Also, the raven was loudly pecking the lintel above your bed like a tiny, feathery landlord demanding rent. Outside, the sky is pale and uncertain. You grab your pack and the carved stone map, because what else would you do? The elder doesn't stop you. No one even asks where you're going. They just hand you some oatcakes and say, "Try not to get too enlightened." You head for the western cliffs. It's not exactly a path, more of a series of flat rocks that happen to be heading in the right direction. The sea breathes steadily below, and the wind is calm for once. The kind of rare Hebridean morning that feels like the island is smiling, or at least smirking. You pass the upper grazing fields where sheep blink at you like you've interrupted something private. You nod. They look away. After a while, you reach a small inlet cut into the land like a forgotten thought. Here, the stone spirals match the markings on your map, not precisely, but enough to make you pause. You kneel, place the carved stone on the earth. It fits, or feels like it does. You wait. This is not a land of lightning epiphanies or burning bushes. This is a land where meaning comes in damp layers and sideways glances. Eventually, you notice something salt streak in the cliff wall, pale, thin, and gleaming like a crack in the world. You touch it. It's cool, real. You remember the stories of veins of salt hidden in the bones of the island, of people tasting the rock when desperate, of one man who claimed to hear music in the stone if he pressed his ear to it long enough. You try it. You don't hear music. You do, however, hear your own breath, and the sea, and, very faintly, a gull laughing at you. You return to the village in the late afternoon, stone still in hand, nothing discovered, and yet something loosened. You find the elder weaving seaweed rope in the square. She looks up, says, "Did it speak?" You shake your head. She nods, as if that was the correct answer. She says, "Try again in winter. The stones are more talkative then." Here's your strange sprinkle of lore. Hebridean traditions often treat stones not as objects, but as participants, memory holders, listeners. Salt-bearing rocks were sometimes wrapped in cloth and placed in the hearth for warmth, to keep them friendly, as one old tale puts it. Whether it worked or not, scholars argue. Naturally, that evening the entire village gathers for what can only be described as semi-festive porridge. It's the last of the summer oats, sweetened with preserved berries and a pinch of trade salt. You eat slowly, quietly. Every bowl tells the story of a season survived. Afterward, you sit by the shore with your cousin, the raven, and the faint hum of a calm tide. The carved stone rests beside you, and for the first time it doesn't feel like a puzzle. It feels like a companion. You fall asleep that night with sea salt on your lips, stone dust on your fingers, and the comfortable certainty that not all journeys are meant to go far. Some just go deep. Next morning, you wake to the sound of humming. Low, wordless, melodic. It seeps into the air like smoke, curling between the beams of the longhouse. At first, you think it's a dream, but no, it's real. One of the weavers is singing as she threads new cloth for the salt frames. Her voice is soft, almost secretive, like she's weaving the song into the fabric itself. You dress slowly. Your limbs ache in that pleasant, well-used way. You step outside into a golden fog, not heavy, just gently glowing sunlight trying to remember how to behave. Today is a day of thanks. Not a festival, not a feast, just quiet gratitude. The end of the salt season draws near. The pits will soon be covered, the cloths packed away, the brine pans scrubbed one last time. But before that, a simple ritual of acknowledgement. You and the others carry small bowls of salt to the cliff path, the same one you walked days ago, following the carved stone map.
Each person places their bowl on a flat stone just above the tide line, not to waste it, to return it. A gesture, a thank you, a closing of the loop. Here's a true grain for your thoughts. Several coastal traditions across the Hebrides included seasonal offerings of salt to the sea. It wasn't religious in the grand sense, more relational. The sea gave, so you gave back, even just a handful, even just once. And here's the oddest part. Some villagers believed the sea noticed. If you gave gratefully, it stayed calm through winter. If you hoarded your harvest too greedily, storms came early. A poetic cause and effect, perhaps. Or just an elegant excuse for erratic weather. You kneel with your bowl. The salt catches the light like tiny stars. You tip it gently. The grains fall, scatter, vanish between stone and sea. The raven caws once from above. Everyone sits for a while afterward. No one speaks. It's not silence from discomfort, it's the quiet you keep when things feel balanced. A kind of stillness earned by effort. Later, the longhouse buzzes with preparation. Not for a party, just the practical winding down of one season and the soft winding up of the next. You help pack the cloths, fold the frames, oil the pans so they don't rust in the damp months. Someone finds a single salt brick tucked into the wall of the storehouse. No one remembers placing it there. It's dusty, slightly chipped, and smells faintly of smoked berries. You decide to keep it, not for trading. For remembering, that night the fire burns low, and the stories are gentler. Less about wild salt walks and more about quiet winters, lost mittens, goats who know things they shouldn't. You go to sleep wrapped in warmth and the gentle ache of endings. And in the darkness, the salt doesn't vanish. It waits, like everything else on this island, patient, silent, real. The wind has shifted again. You feel it in your bones before you even step outside. A softness in the air, a stillness, the kind of day where the world exhales and tells you, rest now. You wander to the salt pits, not out of obligation, but instinct. They're quiet. The cloths are packed, the frames tied down, the brine pans have been tipped, rinsed, laid to rest. The salt season is over. You walk among them slowly, like walking through an empty church. You touch the stones, kneel beside the last puddle of half-evaporated water. Its surface glimmers. You don't disturb it. Just watching. You think about all the moments you've walked this stretch, sunburned, soaked, tired, laughing, wondering. And now, finally, calm. You return to the longhouse where the elder waits with a small wooden box. Inside, a spiral carved from salt, rough but unmistakable. It's meant for you, a sign, a symbol, a reminder. You don't speak, you just hold it. And in that quiet, the island feels stiller than usual. A truth settles on you then, soft as wool and firm as stone. The salt isn't just a thing you gather. It's the language of the land, of the people, of the wind. You think about all the hands that worked these pits before yours, generations you'll never meet, whose lives folded around the same winds, the same tools, the same stubborn raven. And now somehow you're part of that line. Not for glory, not for gold, but for the way salt clings to everything, reminds you what matters, and makes even the plainest meal unforgettable. You sleep that night wrapped in salt-dusted blankets, spiral charm beside you, wind whispering like an old friend. And for once, even the raven is silent. And so the long season drifts to its close. The salt pans sleep beneath their covers. The sea murmurs just beyond the hills, and the windens wild, once loud slows to a hush that brushes the thatch like a lullaby. Inside the longhouse, the fire dims. Shadows stretch slowly along the walls, soft and flickering, like old stories retelling themselves for no one in particular. You lie still. The spiral charm rests beneath your hand, warm from your skin. The air smells faintly of ash, of brine, of wool left too long by the hearth. You think maybe about the first day you walked the salt pits, about cloth stretched in sunlight, barrels filled with sharp-tongued fish, hands rubbed raw and laughing anyway. And about how something as simple as salt so small, so taken for granted, held your days together like a thread through warm linen. Outside, the tide turns again. It always does. The village sleeps. Even the raven, perched beneath the eaves, has tucked its head beneath one wing. And you, eyes heavy, heart quiet, let yourself drift. Let the spiral carry you. Let the salt hold you. Let the wind, the sea, and the slow rhythm of time ease you into stillness. You've made it through the season. You've earned your rest. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep with salt in your soul. And the sea at your door.